All right, let's get to your next question, which is the topic of the week here, as I teased at the very top of the show.
Yeah, I feel like we could have spent the whole episode on this one, but we got a structure to abide by. This one is, how can you survive Bye-mageddon, right? We have 6 teams on bye this week, and there's some really good teams out there. The Cardinals, the Lions, the Jags, the Raiders, the Rams, and the Seahawks. A lot of big-time fantasy names on those rosters. So managers have been trying to figure out what to do all week long. Of course, I write my waiver wire column on Mondays. Hopefully everyone was reading that and picking up players to fill their lineups with those guys. And yet I know there are a lot of managers out there. I'm friends with a bunch of them who don't necessarily pay attention very closely, who might forget to set those waiver claims early in the week. So I think it's a good idea for those types of people, or for people who just aren't necessarily happy with their rosters right now. Maybe they just realized they had more injuries than they expected because injury reports come out a little later in the week. So what can you do? What players can you go out and potentially pick up here to try to get by this week when you have so many guys, that could be out, and, not just the buys like we're mentioning here, but also some of these injured players as well. And I think quarterback's fairly straightforward. Like, people can go check out my rankings there. We're also going to talk about some of the backup quarterbacks who are turning into starters this week. We'll talk about them in a second. So let's just focus on wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends like we have on the screen there. And for receivers, the names that I would focus on here: Troy Franklin, Alec Ayomanor, Alec Pierce, and Jalen Noel. I think there's a name on this list that you feel very strongly about, so I will not take that player. I will not steal that guy from you. I will instead talk about Jalen Noel here, and it comes down to all the injuries that the Houston Texans have at receiver. We saw this happen to the Texans last year. We thought they went out and got guys that were going to be able to give them a little more depth, and yet right now it's like very strange the way they've deployed this receiving core, even amidst all these injuries, right? Christian Kirk, last week on Friday, it seemed like he aggravated his hamstring injury, the one that he had earlier in the season. Doesn't look like he's going to play this week. Nico Collins suffers a concussion. It's a short week for them trying to come back. It doesn't seem like he's going to be cleared. We'll keep an eye on that, but I would doubt that either of those guys are going to play this week. And you would expect that, okay, these 2 rookies that they got, that we were very high on these guys before the season, and Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, these guys are there. They're going to step up. And yet they don't quite do that. Like, yes, Jalen Noel did have an okay game in terms of his production. Like, with Collins leaving early, he played a season high 43% of the snaps. He earned 7 targets. He finished with 4 grabs for 77 yards. A lot of that came late in the game because they were playing Xavier Hutchinson and Braxton Berrios. Like, what are we doing here, Texans? Like, they don't trust the rookies that much that we have guys like that out there. And I get it early in the season, right? Early in the season, sure, the rookies weren't up to speed, but now we're approaching like midway through the year. You need these rookies to step up. I would hope that because Jalen Noel actually did have some production late in the game, that they will look to him and give him a little more opportunity this week. And yet I don't know that I can say that for sure, but he's somebody that I do feel like you could slot into your lineup and hope that he ends up leading this team again in receiving. Just, a versatile player. And obviously I'm not giving this breakdown to you. I'm giving this more to everyone listening right now, but a guy who does have that like high-end athleticism. He can line up inside outs. I think he's more successful if he's lined up out of the slot, but they can kind of use him in a variety of ways. I really hope that they do that, because I think he could be a wide receiver 3 flex option, assuming Kirk and Collins are out, and assuming that the coaching staff gives him a little more opportunity and doesn't wait till the very end of the game. But you can't say that that is for sure going to be the case. And then Jaden Higgins is also a name that we could consider here, but I have much less faith in him because he's done basically nothing this year, right? So there's been some flashes. It's been weird how they deployed these receivers. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the Texans wideouts, but it's been a strange one. And yet there's got to be some fantasy value there, right? There has to be some fantasy value coming out of this group this week.
The funny thing is, you said there's one that you're pretty excited to talk about. And I think if we had just paused the tape there and allowed people to bet on which one, was the guy I was excited to talk about, I think the massive favorite would have been Jalen Noel, because he was he's not though. There is a guy I'm excited to talk about on this list, but and I'm still excited to talk about Jalen Noel, because this was, like I said, a prospect I absolutely loved. I thought was like a 1st round talent that fell to the 3rd round. And I mean, Boone, if they come out and they play Braxton Berrios as the slot receiver again this week, especially with Nico likely to miss this game with a concussion, I'm gonna go freaking crazy, bro. I couldn't care less about the Texans and the success of that team, other than I like some of these guys. I really like Nico Collins as a person and as a player, and like I want the best for. I like CJ Stroud. I want the best for some of these guys, but I couldn't care less about the team's success. But I'm gonna go crazy if they don't play Jalen Noel, especially because I saw this quote from D'Amico Ryans. This was a couple of days ago. This is him talking about Jalen Noel. Outstanding, probably our most explosive player for us. He showed up big time for us. Jalen has that big playability in him. Excited to see him continue to flourish in that role. I'm like, yeah, maybe somebody like the head coach should decide to put him on the field more. I know that Ryans is a defensive guy, but come on. We can all see this with our eyeballs. I have a burner account on Twitter where I just post film. And it's only so that I can bet it in the reception perception site, so I don't like slam the data of the site and cause it to crash, all this stuff. One of the tweets that broke contain and like made it to Texans Twitter, because it's all these like explosive Jalen Noel down the field routes and plays, and Texans fans are all on this too. They're like, what are we doing? Why are we not playing this guy? He's 3% rostered in Yahoo leagues right now. So if you buy what Boone is selling there, what D'Amico Ryans is saying about his own explosive player that he may or may not give full-time reps, he's somebody you can pick up and just park on the end of your bench even and see what happens, even if you're not going to start him this week. So I'm really excited about Jalen Noel. And Boone, I think it's untenable to run out that receiver core that we saw last week. I just think there's no way they can do that.
Are you worried at all about Higgins? Like, Higgins also was somebody that came in that I thought would get a role in this offense pretty early. And yet, like last week, 63% of the snaps scoreless in that game, or catchless, sorry, in that game. Catchless, scoreless, didn't do anything. Weird to me, very strange that he hasn't caught on more. And yes, some of it is how he's being deployed and but it's very weird to me that we haven't seen more from him this year, given all the injuries and Christian Kirk missing so much time and him really not kind of catching on in this offense, no pun intended.
He's, to me, very similar as a prospect to your boy Keon Coleman, where he's one of these guys that was a collegiate perimeter receiver that I think struggled to separate, and his best success in the NFL is likely to kick inside and be more of like a big slot receiver. As you know, the Bills have done that pretty much 0% with Keon Coleman. Yeah. And right now the Texans have kind of used Jaden Higgins as a supplementary X receiver, kind of behind Nico Collins, because Xavier Hutchinson they like as that move around flanker. It's either Braxton Berrios for whatever reason or Jalen Noel's the slot receiver. So Higgins is kind of banged. And I think especially if he goes out this week and plays X, I'm really interested to see what he looks like there if he's starting in replacement of Nico Collins. So I think that's part of the reason why it's taken a minute. That doesn't mean he's going to do nothing all year long or he won't be a good player in the NFL, but it might just take him a minute and like them a minute to figure out how to use him, as opposed to Noel. It's a little, and that's why I was higher on Noel as a prospect. It's just easier to see the vision for him. Stick him in the slot, let him run downfield routes, get him involved in the quick game. But for Higgins, I think he's a little bit, even though he's drafted higher, he's a little bit more difficult in like how to get him on the field, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, I will admit a little behind the scenes for everyone that the reason I said that I knew there was a guy that you liked on that list is because we have a doc for one of our group articles that we have every week about bold predictions. And you actually had a bold prediction, I believe, about one of the guys on this list. Unless you changed it, there was that name on there. So is that the guy that you want to talk about?
That is the guy I want to talk about. Alec Pierce, number one, is another guy. I talked about him a little bit on the show with Ray Garvin earlier this week, where I just think he needs to be rostered in way more leagues than he is. He's only 25% rostered right now. And even if I didn't think that he could be a top 20 receiver this week, which is my bold prediction for him this week, is that he could be a top 20 receiver. So after flaming out with the Luther Burden prediction last week, I'm going to try one more time to talk about a team's like third or fourth pass catching option here. The difference is, though, between Luther Burden and Alec Pierce is, number one, Alec Pierce plays in a better offense. And number two, Alec Pierce actually is on get the burner account off the screen. We can't be showing the secret film Twitter account. Get that off the screen, producers. What are we doing here? But no, I think that Alec Pierce, actually he has really evolved in his game as well. In addition to just being on the field all the time, he's running a bit more of a nuanced route tree. He's running more big in-breaking routes. He's running these routes that are not just static boundary stuff. We've seen him earn more targets in that way too, 10 targets last week. And he's still an explosive downfield player. And that's why I really like him this week, Boone, because he's got a matchup with the Titans, who allow the most yards per target on throws between 10 and 19 air yards, and fifth most on throws of 20-plus air yards, according to Fantasy Points data. So like the matchup, like the usage this week. Josh Downs is likely back off of his concussion, so that's what I was just muddy up the target. Yeah. That will likely muddy up the target projection a little, but if you're starting Pierce, you're doing it for the same reasons that you started Kayshon Boutte against the Titans last week. You're hoping for big plays. You're hoping for touchdowns. Pierce has yet to score this year, so he's hashtag due, as we say in the business.
Yeah, and he is the kind of player, too, that, like, you know, even if you were wrong about this, you could be right. He could catch one long ball for a touchdown. So, yeah, I think he's a good call in a cheap way to get involved in what has turned out to be one of the better offenses this year. And yeah, they're doing a great job, and they have quite the receiving core there. I would like to see them use Josh Downs even more. He had been coming on there before the injury, so hopefully he comes back healthy and continues to be involved, and that doesn't hold Pierce back too much. But yeah, just a great receiving core there. And Daniel Jones, who would have thought, surrounded by this cast, that Daniel Jones would be able to be having the season that he is. All right, so let's go to running back next here, because we'll keep moving. Like I said, we could spend all episode on this, but we shouldn't. So at running back, I'm looking at Tajay Spears, Brashard Smith, Isaiah Davis, and Sean Tucker. And Smith is somebody who I've written about. I mean, going back to week 1, I had him down as a stash. And part of the reason for stashing him, it wasn't that, and we've talked about this in the show, that I thought he was going to break out as like a workhorse in this backfield, but that it seemed like there could be like a very clear role for him based on the fact that the other guys in the backfield were Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. And Pacheco and Hunt have been handling the majority of the carries in this backfield and really have struggled for most of the year, right? Like their production, their efficiency hasn't been great. This rushing attack has really been buoyed by the fact that Patrick Mahomes has just kind of had this like renewed emphasis on running this year. He's got 250 rushing yards. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns. And then over the last month, we've started to see Smith get more involved. It was as a pass catcher initially. He's hauled in at least 3 receptions in each of his past 4 outings. And then in week 7, and we will put all the caveats in the world on this one, because like we said Monday, I don't think we can look at that week 7 game against the Raiders where they got completely blown out. Kansas City did whatever they wanted. We can't look at those numbers and just think that that's going to project forward, right? Because a lot of guys got some garbage time work, got some extra stuff. But 14 carries for 39 yards for Smith, caught 5 passes for 42 yards. Even before it became a blowout, he was involved in that backfield. So that was great. It was also nice that when a rookie gets that increased volume, to see him producing on it, that's great too. And you think back to, can he be maybe a Jerick McKinnon light in this offense, a guy who could be a RB3 flex option if he finds the end zone, could bump up to RB2 value for you. That's the recommendation here with him. He's somebody that you could put in your lineup. Kareem Hunt did get banged up in that game as well, not practicing to start the week. Their first practice was on Thursday today when we're recording this. They play Monday night, so we're going to have to follow that one over the next couple days. But if Kareem Hunt were out, that would only push Brashard Smith even further up the rankings. But right now I'm looking at him as like an RB3 flex. If Hunt were out, I'd have him very firmly as probably a top 30 back this week in fantasy, and a guy who I think his role is going to grow, and he could be a useful piece for you, not just this week, but moving forward in your lineup.
I like that call. He's held a nice role for this team, and I'm just really curious to see if they do put more and more on his plate. I will say, if there's no Kareem Hunt on Monday Night Football, Isaiah Pacheco is definitely going to make a case for getting out of the coping corner, which unfortunately we're going to tape that segment before Monday's game, but we will see how that one goes. I'll talk a little bit about Isaiah Davis on this list of players you have here. You have Tajay Spears, Brashard Smith, Sean Tucker, and Isaiah Davis. Davis is really interesting. Talked about him yesterday with Joel Smith on Buzz's Building, and Davis is somebody I think can actually play a little bit. We've seen him step in for Breece Hall previously and have a nice game. We don't right now know the full injury status with Breece Hall, but even if Hall is active and he's playing, I think they still might need a change of pace there. And like I mentioned, Davis, I think, can play in the run game and the pass game, so you might get some receptions there with him. Tyrod Taylor, who obviously is also dealing with a knee injury. We expect him to start, but he is dealing with the knee injury. Aaron Glenn labeled it as something he's been dealing with for a while. I think he's a little bit more likely to take the checkdowns than Justin Fields is, although Fields has been a bit of a checkdown. It's also, the Jets are just so hard to say at this point. But I also think that this offensive line is still good. It's a good matchup against Cincinnati, so you'd have to be in a pretty tough spot to go to the Jets RB2 if Breece Hall is active, but I certainly think he's a good stash candidate right now.
Yeah, of all the offenses, like we're talking about the Colts and wanting to grab a piece of them, or even the Ravens with Lamar back and stuff. Obviously, the Chiefs are a great offense to invest in. The Jets, maybe not so much, but Davis just has so many ways towards paying off. It's a good matchup. Like you said, he could get used out there even alongside Breece Hall. And then, yeah, there's the whole possibility that Breece Hall could get traded and that Davis, with Braylon Allen out until late in the year, maybe the rest of the year, that Davis could be like a surprising starter at some point in fantasy. That's another reason to grab him and stash him, or grab him and potentially use him this week. Yeah, for sure. All right, so at tight end, I only have 3 here. Juwan Johnson, Dalton Schultz, and Noah Fant. I think they're all interesting for a bunch of different reasons. I'm going to go back to the Texans. I'm going to say Schultz here because of those injuries, because the uncertainty with the receiving core, because they might lean on Braxton Berrios. And that for that reason, they might have to throw to Dalton Schultz a whole bunch. And the last couple of weeks, we've seen him step up. 5 catches for 60 yards in week 5 before the bye, 9 catches for 98 yards this past week. And if Collins and Kirk are out, I think there is a good chance that Schultz could make a case to be a low-end tight end 1 in this game because of the volume he could command. At worst, a strong tight end 2 streamer. The 49ers defense too, which is his matchup this week, not quite as scary as they would have been, right? The Fred Warner injury kind of changes everything there. You look at what they've done against tight ends this year. The last couple of weeks, they've allowed at least 50 yards to each starting tight end they've faced. So that's another feather in the cap for Schultz there. Just monitor him as well, because I don't know why the Texans are so badly bitten by the injury bug here, but Schultz to start the week dealing with back and shoulder issues that kept him limited in practice. I didn't see their practice report yet today, but we'll make sure that he's going to be out there. If he is a very good streamer, and I'm using him as a bye week fill-in a couple spots. So that tells you that I believe in him as a play this week.
You believe in him. You believe in Dalton Schultz. That's what you're telling the people out there. You're a Dalton Schultz
streamer,
bro.
Not as a rest of season tight end 1 starter in your lineup, but as a week 8 streamer with all these injuries in the receiving core. I believe in him as long as he's healthy. That's
well, you know why his back is. Yeah, that's where we're at. You know why his friggin' back is hurt, bro? Because they had to throw him 10 targets. When's the last time Dalton Schultz has gotten 10 targets in a game? I mean, God, it's got to have been since the Dallas days. So he was not ready for that level of volume. I'll tell you that. But that again just goes to show with the state of their receiver room right now, and for whatever Nick Caley is doing on offense. He's been a priority player. Yeah, he caught 9 passes in that game against the Seattle Seahawks. His previous high with the Texans the last 2 years was 5. So a lot of usage for Dalton Schultz, more than we're used to. That's why his back is hurting. All right, I will talk about Noah Fant here, who plays in the Joe Flacco Firefest offense right now for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was 3rd in terms of route participation last week against Pittsburgh Steelers. 98% for Jamar Chase, 90% for T. Higgins. And then it was Noah Fant and Andre Yoshivas tied at 76% for next. So with no Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant can go in there. He can play inline. He can also move around a little bit. 20.4% snaps in the slot, 24.5% snaps out wide. So he can do, again, the traditional inline tight end stuff, but he can also actually move around the formation a little bit. It's a good matchup against a Jets defense that's likely to not have Sauce Gardner. So Fant is definitely someone who scored a touchdown last week. I think you can chase as a potential tight end streamer this week as well.
Yeah, in the games, there were 3 full games that he's played with either Joe Burrow or Joe Flacco. He scored 2 touchdowns during those games, and he has at least 4 catches in all of those games. So not to, take another shot at Jake Browning here. And of course, Gesicki was out there. Some things have changed along the way. But yeah, when he's gotten decent quarterback play in this offense, he has been able to produce. So he was somebody else I really strongly debated talking about him there. he is certainly on the streamer radar, and I wrote him up in my deep stashes column today as well. So people can go check that one out. There's a few other players in that one that I think might fit this category as well, of players that you could pick up and potentially start this week, if not hold them as stashes.
Yeah, you debated talking about him, but then you remembered you're a Dalton Schultz truther, so you had to go for the Dalton Schultz call out there.
Order the Dalton Schultz jersey. Yeah, let's go.